Julia was born as the firstborn of an extremely conservative family who followed all the rules of the ancient traditions to the letter. From an early age, she realized that she was not the daughter her parents expected. Before starting the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any updates. The burden of not being a male child was felt not only by her, but also by her mother, who steadfastly endured the harsh criticism of the family for having given birth to only a female child. The frustrated mother blamed Julia for the domestic problems. When his brother was born a year later, the differences became even more evident. The child was the center of the family's attention, receiving love and care, while Julia knew the bitter taste of loneliness. Growing up, she was convinced that she had to give up everything for the sake of her brother. When it was time to go to high school, his brother was enrolled in a renowned private and expensive school. Julia did not even dare to dream of such a privilege. However, she had a thirst for knowledge that she could not ignore. With a determination never shown before, she begged her father to allow her to continue her studies, but her persistence brought only contempt. "Why waste money on a girl?" the father said scornfully. "Isn't it enough that you went to high school?" Julia understood that her father's words were direct and very offensive. At 16, he found work in a textile factory, dividing his time between hard work during the day and secret study at night. Away from the critical eyes of his family, books were his silent friends, and the knowledge that his secret weapon was study. For 3 years, Julia fought with all her strength, working hard during the day and studying at night. His efforts paid off when, at the age of 19, he passed the high school diploma equivalent examination. With this result, Julia decided that she would no longer accept being treated as inferior just because she was a woman. One silent night, she left home in search of her freedom and began to live alone. He found work in a restaurant, and there he met Andrea, the owner's only son. Andrea, who had just left the army and was ready to return to college, was the first to pay her some real compliments that deeply touched her heart. Soon, the affection between them turned into love. They dated for less than a year and decided to get married in secret, moving in together in Julia's small apartment. The wedding did not remain a secret for long. When Andrea's mother, who was also Julia's boss, found out about the wedding, she was shocked and angry. He confronted Julia furiously. "I hired you because I felt sorry for you, but why marry my son behind my back? My son could be with the hottest girl in college, building a successful future for himself, and not be with someone like you." Julia, displeased, replied, "Madam, I did not seduce your son. We simply fell in love. You are from another world. You and Andrea are not compatible, and I will not stop until I have driven you away," Andrea's mother said, turning and walking away. Before she could respond, Andrea's mother fired her without paying her what she owed. Later, the mother burst into the couple's apartment, commenting on what she saw before her. Julia was terrified until Andrea arrived and saw the chaos. "Mom, that's enough. I've decided to get married too. It wasn't just Julia. We'll have a baby. You'll become a grandmother." The mother paused for a moment, but her anger returned with new accusations. "What if that child wasn't even yours?" she accused. Andrea answered confidently, "The son is mine, I'm sure of it." When she heard this, the mother-in-law collapsed to the ground, crying and screaming, "How could you? You have a bright future ahead of you, and you want to throw it away. Julia found herself in a marriage burdened by the ill will and rejection of Andrea's mother. The mother-in-law, after realizing the couple's financial problems, ended up thinking about it more carefully. Despite everything, she did not want someone with her last name to grow up in poverty. She decided that Julia and Andrea would live with her. Pregnant and tired, Julia divided her time between household chores and hard work at the restaurant. Her mother-in-law kept complaining, saying that Julia was nothing but lazy. Despite the heavy workload, Julia found comfort in her husband, who was her support. An already difficult situation turned into a real storm when the mother-in-law, deceived by an investment charlatan, lost all her savings. Andrea, desperate, tried to calm his mother while Julia tried to manage the situation. "With the money I have saved, we can rent a simple apartment." The mother-in-law became annoyed. "How dare you speak to my son like that? It's all your fault that we're going through all this." Julia felt deeply sad, but with the money she had, she rented a small apartment in the basement, determined to build a new life for herself and her family. After some time, his mother-in-law became ill, and Andrea took on 2 jobs to improve his financial situation. Julia also did not sit idle, starting to do extra work at home. Despite all the difficulties, Julia never stopped fighting. Before continuing, like if you find the story engaging. After 10 years of struggle, Julia managed to buy a new house when her daughter was in high school. During the move, her mother-in-law belittled her contribution, attributing the success only to Andrea. Julia knew that her effort had also been fundamental, but she preferred not to answer. However, any hope that things would improve was dashed when her marriage began to fall apart. Andrea found work as a product salesman for a construction company and often stayed out all night. Julia knew that those outings included drinking and being with other women. Every time she mentioned it, he got angry. One night, after another argument, Julia decided not to let the injustice continue. "My daughter and I will leave this house only after you have given half the value of the house and agreed to pay child support." Much to Andrea's surprise, he agreed and transferred the promised money to Julia's account. After the divorce, Julia went through a long period of sadness, but she knew she had to find a way to support herself and pay for her daughter's education. So she looked for an employment agency and started working as a housekeeper. Over time, her dedication and attention to detail made her recognized for her excellence. The agency director called her for an interview and offered her a well-paid job with a demanding client. Julia accepted without hesitation. When he arrived at the home of Matteo, his new employer, he found the residence impeccable. Eagerly, she began cleaning and cooking, determined to prove her worth. Despite his concerns, Matteo did not express any dissatisfaction and continued to leave appreciative glances. This exchange of notes continued for 6 months, during which Julia began to eagerly await the day when she would work. One day, she found Matteo suffering from the flu and, concerned for his well-being, brought him medicine and a nutritious chicken soup. The next day, she found several beauty products left for her as a thank you. Julia, not feeling comfortable accepting the gifts, spoke to Matteo about it, who explained to her that they were a way to thank her for the care she had taken for him. Shortly after, Matteo invited her to dinner, and Julia accepted with trepidation. During dinner, they discovered that they had a lot in common. Matteo confessed that he had fallen in love with Julia and her way of loving. After a long period of reflection, Julia agreed to marry him. Finally, Julia had the wedding of her dreams and went to live with Matteo, starting a new life. Emma was also happy, supported by Matteo in her studies. Reflecting on her past, Julia realized how far she had come and how happy she was.